Why is it that Shia Muslims hate themselves? This topic is for those Sunni Muslims who wonder why Shia Muslims perform this act, but also for others outside of Islam interested in knowing why, but also for one to understand if it is permissible to do so or not according to Islam. The act of hitting oneself by Shia Muslims is done in purpose of commemorating Imam Hussein's martyrdom, the grandson of the Prophet, a type of mourning for what happened to him. Besides hitting oneself, the Shia Muslims cry over this incident, and some are speechless, so they are stunned over what has happened to the Prophet's grandson. Are these acts or grief in its various forms for this purpose of commemorating Imam Hussein allowed within the religion of Islam or not? I will now explain every aspect of this concept, or at least in depth. When it comes to hitting oneself, this is a type of mourning for Prophet Muhammad's grandson, Imam Hussein, peace be upon him, who went through total oppression, injustice and martyrdom. For Shia Islam, Imam Hussein is a leader in Allah's way, sent to guide mankind in his time, and for Sunni Islam, he is one of the greatest characters around the Prophet. It is within history so that both Sunni Islam and Shia Islam acknowledge this incident with Imam Hussein's martyrdom in the hands of Yazid, son of Muawiyah, and Yazid's army to have taken place. Yazid himself was not there when the killing took place, but it was he who ordered his soldiers to kill Imam Hussein. The enemy of Islam surrounded Imam Hussein and his pure family members and some few companions, under 100 in total, against thousands of the oppressors and evildoers who forced Imam Hussein to give up his leadership, while Imam Hussein would never give up his leadership to a tyrant in Yazid and his army, who would change Islam's reputation and the religion as a whole by being unfair to mankind and not to act in accordance to the religion of Allah. Therefore, Imam Hussein and his few servants stood up for justice and resisted against Yazid and his army, teaching humanity to stand up for what is right and not to fall short on evil and evildoers, as one of the principles of Shia Islam is to hate evil and dissociate from it. What would it mean for Imam Hussein to accept Yazid as a leader to mankind? It would mean to accept the rules Yazid would come with. That would be to practice everything that isn't Islam, and so we would be straying from the Prophet's teachings. Also, would it mean that the people in the hands of Yazid would be treated unfairly and unjustly, and so Imam Hussein could not accept such rulership? Either way, if Imam Hussein accepted the tyrant Yazid or not, it would make no difference. If he accepts, then Islam would be in the hands of a tyrant and would open up new possibilities for other tyrants to rule after, not doing good for mankind, spreading their religion wrong. And if he did not accept, which he did not, then at least a death would be worthy for standing against oppression and injustice, teaching others to act with same righteousness in standing against tyrants, and would motivate us all to be better human beings in being free in front of those who oppress and make change to history. With Imam Hussein's martyrdom, in the event that occurred, history changed so that more people acted to stand up against those who oppress and commit injustices, leading to a positive change in history after this battle. And so the enemy of Islam in Yazid and his army caused suffering to Imam Hussein and his family in such a way that Imam Hussein is called the Lord among the martyrs, for not accepting Yazid's offer in becoming a ruler over mankind. Shia Muslims mourn this incident either by crying, hitting themselves slightly by the chest with the right hand, or some are even speechless over this incident, so they cannot express their feelings more than being stunned. Then there are those who beat themselves up with knives and chains. The last act of mourning is by Shia Islam forbidden, as for the concept of zina is forbidden in Islam, meaning the people who beat themselves up with chains and knives in the name of Shia Islam for remembering Imam Hussein are not following the religion of Islam correctly, as for any Muslim who makes the sin of zina. If a Muslim performs the act of zina, it doesn't mean it is wrong with Islam as a whole and its just system. Rather, it is wrong with the person who performs this sinful act. It is not wrong with Allah and His religion if someone in Allah's way does wrong. The consequence is upon the doer of an act, not Allah and His religion. Thus, the beating with chains and knives cannot be used as a premise that Shia Islam is wrong, since Shia Islam condemns this act of mourning. Even if it was the case that most Shia Muslims engaged in this type of mourning with knives and chains, which it is not, it still would not be valid to claim that Shia Islam is wrong because of this, as the religion is clear in its rule prohibiting this practice. There is always a group of people within each faith who gives bad reputation for one's faith, so it should not deceive oneself to believe that Shia Islam or any faith is wrong for those who do evil within each faith. We must be critical and search within ourselves rather than to understand a faith system through those who present it with bad reputation. The opposite of evil within each faith also exists and performs acts accordingly to what is prescribed within the religion. It is stated by Imam Ali within Shia narrations that two categories of people will fall ruin for him and his family. That is one whose love is exaggerating, as in the case of hitting oneself with knives and chains for Prophet's family, but also the one who hates the family of the Prophet. This is mentioned in Nahj al-Balagha. Now there might be some who say, but a scholar within Shia Islam accepts this act with the beating of oneself with knives and chains, or that it is mentioned within Shia narrations that it is okay. So what is our response to this claim? We should not confirm that the beating of oneself with knives and chains is permissible for Shia Islam based upon a scholar's opinion when many other scholars within Shia Islam condemns this act, and the Holy Prophet in the books of Shia Islam, Al-Kafi Volume 1, Hadith 201 mentions that if something goes against the Quran, the book of Allah, then we should disregard the narration. In other words, throw it away. But if it goes in line with the Quran, then indeed the Prophet has stated it. So if it is even mentioned about the hitting of oneself with knives and chains within Shia sources, we should understand that the Prophet and the successors from Prophet's family has not stated it, making it a weak narration for going against the Quran to hurt oneself. It is more of a cultural thing, and culture in any faith does not represent a religion, so that in this case Shia Islam is free from hurting oneself as a remembrance to Imam Hussein with knives and chains. And even if it wasn't forbidden hitting oneself with knives and chains, it isn't a topic that should be discussed as the first question, since there are other questions prior to this that needs to be answered. It is the same with math. First we deal with easier or rather more fundamental questions for us to then proceed with more difficult questions. A believer's conversation with a non-believer should not start off by discussing if alcohol is forbidden or not, but rather more essential matters such as if God exists or not. We will thus never understand the mourning of Imam Hussein if we do not deal with more fundamental questions within Sunni Islam and Shia Islam first. But in general, with every act, as for those who do an act and not knowing it is forbidden, then Allah might be forgiving. But it is difficult to not see this act as forbidden, as it is not an act that would bring good for others to see and for oneself. As for the other mourning procedures, it is totally fine to cry, hit oneself lightly by the chest with the right hand, and to be speechless for Allah in the way of Imam Hussein. To express feelings towards others than Allah is not forbidden within Islam. Allah has created feelings for us to express them to each other, and sometimes we cannot control it, never is it impermissible. It is also never to associate partner with Allah in any way if we mourn for someone we love. It doesn't mean that we love this person we mourn for more than Allah. It is in the way of Allah we do it, so by this act it should make one come closer to Allah rather than to be distant from Allah. That is why this act in itself, by mourning the tragedy of Imam Hussein, is a spiritual experience. It brings oneself closer to Allah and not far away from Him. By going through this mourning procedure, one will notice inside of oneself the opposite of things related to the dissociation from Allah. If one wants to try to get closer to Allah, then one should try to mourn for Imam Hussein. The crying or the sorrow that comes within is triggered by an external source as a gift for those who love Imam Hussein in their heart. Now, for us to understand how mourning for Imam Hussein is a way to Allah, it is by giving examples within the Quran. For instance, chapter 12 verse 96 mentions that Prophet Joseph cast a shirt over Prophet Jacob's face, and so he regained his sight. Here, Prophet Joseph was an intermediate way to reach Allah. Because of Prophet Joseph's closeness to Allah, his shirt made Prophet Jacob seeing without Prophet Jacob addressing Allah first. In chapter 20 verse 31, we can also read that Prophet Moses asked Allah to strengthen him through his brother Aaron. He didn't say, "Strengthen me by yourself, O Allah," even though he could have said to Allah to strengthen him with Allah by his side, which is also permissible. Both an indirect way and a direct way is permissible within Islam for us to reach Allah, so that the mourning we do for Imam Hussein is logical for us to reach Allah. More examples of an indirect way is that we reach Allah through the sunnah of the Prophet and not our own sunnah, but also we use medicine to take care of our health or study through books for us to gain knowledge, rather than for Allah to give us health and knowledge through Himself without medicine or books. Only when we pray it should be a direct link with Allah and not through someone other than Allah. So we understand that crying or hitting oneself lightly by the chest for Imam Hussein is actually a closeness to Allah and not anything else, as Imam Hussein is a righteous servant of Allah, is a leader in Allah's way for mankind to his time, so that following his path, which is a path leading to Allah, will bring us to the correct teachings of Prophet Muhammad. And if we have the correct teachings of the Prophet, which Imam Hussein provides for us, then we get closer to Allah. It is like the example of reaching the king through the king's soldiers, which is a faster way than if we are going to contact the king directly, which is more difficult to approach. It takes longer time. So who is Imam Hussein for us to understand better why we can mourn for him? Imam Hussein is, according to Sunni Islam and Shia Islam, better than our parents and more important than our parents, since he is a family member of the Prophet and a Sahaba, in other words, a companion. Within Sunan Ibn Majah 2362, it is mentioned for Sunni Islam that the companions of the Prophet are the best of generation, in which Imam Hussein is included within. For Sunni Muslims, the companions of the Prophet, in which Imam Hussein is included within, are worth more than our parents in sight of Allah. So if we can mourn for our parents when they die, then most definitely we can do the same for Imam Hussein, the grandson of Prophet Muhammad, a leader in Allah's way according to Shia Islam, and one who is described as a leader of all youth in paradise within Sunni narrations such as Jami' Tirmidhi 3768 and Sunan Ibn Majah 118. Within another Sunni narration, it is mentioned that the Prophet has stated, "Whoever loves Hussein loves me, and whomever hates Hussein hates him," in other words, the Prophet. More narrations from Sunni Islam and Shia Islam in favor of Imam Hussein is stating that the Prophet took him under his cloak together with Imam Ali, Fatima and Imam Hassan, and so a verse came upon them from Allah. Chapter 33 verse 33, that Allah intends for them to be purified from all uncleanliness thoroughly, and within other translations to this verse, it describes this incident for Prophet's family to be cleansed from impurity of sins. Now for Allah to remove all uncleanliness from Prophet's family, in which Imam Hussein is included within, it doesn't just mean for them to be cleansed from physical dirt, because otherwise this verse would not exist for such small purpose, but also because it mentions all uncleanliness, which is all impurities such as spiritual, mental, thought-wise, and not just related to physical uncleanliness or just some uncleanliness. This narration is both within Shia books and Sunni books, for instance Al-Kafi Volume 1 Hadith 484 and Sahih Muslim 2424. Further, it is mentioned about Imam Hussein that before the Prophet died, he, in other words the Prophet, announced to his people that he is leaving behind two weighty things for us to hold on to, and if we hold on to it, we will not go astray: the Book of Allah, the Quran, and his family from Imam Ali and his descendants. This is mentioned in both sources, within Bihar and Anwar, Volume 2, page 316 to 317, and Sahih Muslim 2408a, but also Jami' Tirmidhi 3788. Besides that, it is clear within these sources that Imam Hussein is sent to a time after Prophet Muhammad as a leader for mankind. We also know of today, all Muslims, that Imam Mahdi from Prophet's family is sent to our time as a leader to mankind. This is mentioned in both Sunni and Shia sources: Musnad Ahmad 773, Sunan Ibn Majah 4085, Sunan Abi Dawood 4284, and Al-Kafi Volume 1 Hadith 8947. So since Imam Mahdi is a descendant from Imam Ali through Imam Hussein and is actually to our time for all Muslims, then before Imam Mahdi, a time has been occupied with Imam Hussein's leadership over mankind. The case of Imam Hussein is such that when we look into Imam Mahdi, everyone agrees that when Allah will unveil who he is among us, then Imam Mahdi in the way of Allah has more right over the believers than what we have over ourselves. Meaning, if Imam Mahdi as a leader over mankind to our time is to tell us to do something, then we should do it as we should obey our leader. The concept of obeying the leader is mentioned in Sahih Bukhari 7142. So likewise is the case for Imam Hussein. He is someone to be obeyed and prioritized more than ourselves. We can also understand this by reading the Quran chapter 33 verse 6, that the concept is for an authority over us to have more right over us than ourselves. This Quranic verse addresses the Prophet himself as an authority over people and has the right over them, which also is true for the successors to come after Prophet Muhammad, which Imam Hussein is included within, but also Imam Mahdi to our time. The one sent to mankind by Allah is someone to be prioritized over ourselves. And so we understand the status of Imam Hussein in sight of Allah for us to then understand that if someone close to us dies and we can mourn for them, then definitely we can do so for Imam Hussein. If Allah were to ask us to choose between ourselves or Imam Hussein, we should choose Imam Hussein. If Allah were to ask to choose between our parents or Imam Hussein, we should choose Imam Hussein. Imam Hussein's right is like that of Allah telling Prophet Ibrahim to offer his son in Ismail within the Quran by killing him in the way of Allah. And so if Allah asks us in the way of Imam Hussein, the same then we should obey. This is the right of Imam Hussein, the grandson of the Prophet, a companion of the Prophet, someone that has been cleansed from all uncleanliness, someone to adhere to after the Prophet so that we do not go astray, and a leader over youth in paradise, which is a leader over all, since we all are youth in paradise. The whole concept of Islam is about love, helping each other and care for each other, so we can cry for each other and be there for each other. Allah does not forbid this. Otherwise, if we did not care for no one but Allah, then since we cannot comprehend Allah and clearly understand Him fully, then we would be lost, distant from everything, even become narcissists for not building feelings for those around that we are supposed to love. This is not what Allah wants. Through each other we can reach Allah better than to be alone in the path of Allah. We adhere to Prophet Muhammad's way to reach Allah and not our own way directly to Allah. We follow his sunnah and not our own sunnah. And imagine if those close ones around you went through what Imam Hussein and his family and few companions of his went through, being beheaded, trampled on the bodies with horses, getting spears all over the bodies, tents on fire, being surrounded by thousands of bloodthirsty evildoers, arms being cut off, all of this in the middle of the heat with no water, and women and children to be dragged with chains after the battle from the battlefield to prisons kilometers away for over days. So if we hear someone cry about this, or someone who retells the story with a sorrowful voice and more grievous details, emotional speeches about Imam Hussein, the family members and the few companions of his, should this not make us cry? Imagine, as mentioned, if it happened to someone you love, your mother, father, sister, brother, or a close friend, and you hear someone talking about your tragedy with an emotional speech, or you read about your tragedy in what happened to those you love in detail or saw this happen. How would you feel and react? Imagine the pain and sorrow. I really encourage one to delve into this tragedy that happened to Imam Hussein and his close ones. Read about it to feel and be affectionate towards this leader in Allah's way. Now, if someone is still unsure about Imam Hussein's authority, his leadership over mankind to his time, and the right he has over us and our parents and every believer, is to understand the link between him and our leader to our time in Imam Mahdi. Imam Mahdi is a descendant from Prophet Muhammad through his daughter Fatima and his cousin Imam Ali, who got married and gave birth to Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, in which Imam Mahdi comes from as a descendant of Imam Hussein. How come Imam Mahdi, a descendant of Imam Hussein, is a leader sent to our time, to the worst generation, but Imam Hussein, who is his ancestor and is from a better generation, is not a leader over mankind to his time? Prophet Muhammad in both Sunni and Shia sources has narrated that he leaves behind the Quran and his family from Imam Ali and his descendants, so that Imam Hussein is included to be followed. Thus we understand the status of Imam Hussein in the sight of Allah. In chapter 2 verse 124 from the Quran, it is mentioned that Prophet Abraham became a leader for mankind after his prophethood and fulfillment of all his tests. This is the role and title a successor of the Prophet Muhammad has. It is such a high relationship with Allah that lastly Prophet Abraham became it, and so Imam Hussein has obtained this status by being a leader. Even history recalls that the indirect killer in Yazid, who sent thousands of soldiers to kill Imam Hussein, did all of this for realizing that Imam Hussein is the rightful caliph and that this title should be taken away from him. And so commemorating Imam Hussein with mourning is firstly permissible, but also doing so one time a year is perfectly fine, since we can visit our close ones when they die once a week or every month. I'm sure that you or anyone has experienced loss of close ones. We witness all kinds of mourning procedures, from crying to hitting one's face on the wall or going through depression, but also that we try to visit them often, so one reason would be for them to be remembered. Maybe is it that we need to understand the meaning of true love for us to understand the crying or the light hitting on one's chest that brings no harm for Imam Hussein. And for some people, since they have not experienced such high level of love, then it is difficult to relate to it, but it shouldn't be seen as wrong either because one has not experienced or gone through this kind of love. It wouldn't be fair as an analysis if one thinks so. I understand that one cannot mourn for someone if this person is not related in any way or not known for oneself, but what Imam Hussein went through is for humanity, so we should be sad or cry, and if we cannot, then we cannot make this to be forbidden within Islam, as we cannot forbid this for anyone who mourns for someone who is loved, but also because the evidence from the Quran, the Prophet's Sunnah, and history, as we now will look into, also mentions it as part of Islam rather than not. It is not impermissible to cry, hit oneself lightly. The Quran is a proof of this. The Quran is perfectly clear when it mentions that Prophet Jacob cried so much for his son Prophet Joseph that he lost his eyesight, even though he knew that Prophet Joseph was alive, and even though it is mentioned in the Quran within the Arabic wording that he could control it. This is mentioned within chapter 12, verse 84 to 94. What is worse, hitting oneself lightly on the chest which brings no harm, or crying until one cannot see? If Allah accepts the crying of Prophet Jacob so that he lost his eyesight for someone he loved, then indeed for the believers to mourn for Imam Hussein by lightly placing one's hand to the chest, which could even increase blood flow and is less harmful than going to the gym, which one gets more pain from, is definitely permissible, as Imam Hussein is a representative of Allah to mankind in his time and someone to be loved more than ourselves and our parents within complete faith. And if Prophet Jacob could cry so he lost eyesight, then the crying people do for Imam Hussein, which does not correspond to losing eyesight, is acceptable within the religion of Islam. Within the Quran, chapter 51, verse 29, it is also mentioned that the wife of Ibrahim, Sarah, when she received the news of a baby, she hit herself so hard on the face because of happiness. The Arabic word fasaka is being used, which is a hard punch upon herself. Why couldn't she just suppress her feelings and be glad over it without the hitting of her face? Why didn't Allah tell her in the next verse that she was wrong for hitting herself? Feelings are made from Allah to us. As stated, it is not invalid to express feelings towards someone we love. Sometimes we cannot control our feelings, thus it is according to logic and within Quran permissible to cry and lightly hit oneself by the chest for Imam Hussein. There is a level beyond what is considered usual happiness or sorrow which humans could go through and even day-to-day life experience sometimes. That is for the definition to lean both towards joy and sorrow. This level of sorrow or joy is not strange, rather it is described by Allah in the Quran as natural and permissible. Even the Prophet's wife Aisha, according to one of Sunni Islam's most prominent Quran interpreter and historian, Al-Tabari, mentions that she hit her chest and face along with other women when Prophet Muhammad died. This is mentioned in Al-Tabari, volume 9, page 200. I do not have the full reference to what I'm going to state now. What one can do is by hearing this, search this up. But even Prophet Muhammad mourned by crying heavily and a lot for his uncle and relatives when they died. This should be mentioned in Jami' Tirmidhi and Musnad Ahmad, Sunni narrations. So this is part of the Prophet's Sunnah as well. We are not robots. So if we see a group of people in a room remembering and for someone to retell about the incident of Imam Hussein by crying and by lightly putting the right hand on the chest, which is a form of hitting not even close to feeling something harmful, then this should not be seen as wrong because it may feel uncomfortable for some to witness. Otherwise, the act of prayer would be wrong, since there are also some atheists that feels uncomfortable to witness this act with prayer. Some atheists might see the motion in prayer by standing up and going down for prostration to be weird, just as some Sunni Muslims sees a group of people sitting together to mourn for Imam Hussein as weird or uncomfortable. But neither practice is wrong within the Quran and the Prophet's Sunnah. And there is no logic for an act to be wrong based upon for someone else to feel uncomfortable witnessing the act being performed. It is the lack of knowledge from this person who witnessed that needs to be fixed. And imagine you and a group of people in a room express grief for someone loved who has passed away recently. Would this be classified as permissible within Islam or not? Obviously, it is permissible. So what is the difference between when Shia Muslims sit together and cry and lightly beat their chest for Imam Hussein compared to an ordinary day when some non-Shia Muslims sit in a room, cry and express their emotions by lightly hitting their bodies without causing harm for someone who has passed away? I will tell what is not permissible. What is not permissible and only a cultural thing, not included in the religion of Islam, is that some Shia Muslims that goes to the extreme by jumping, hitting oneself very hard with the hands and shouting the name of Imam Hussein to a musical beat. It is no longer genuine, rather it becomes a festival. And many Shia Muslims are performing this scene, but within each religion, as for Sunni Islam, Shia Islam, Christianity and so forth, the minorities within each faith are the good ones, so it cannot be said that Shia Islam is wrong as a whole, when firstly the books and the scholars do not support this festival or jumping of people beating themselves hard, but also since majority of people do not indicate the truth. The Quran mentions only few of Allah's servants are grateful, and within chapter 6 verse 116 it states that if we obeyed majority of people, we would have gone astray. So there are those few Shia Muslims who performs the mourning for Imam Hussein correctly by crying with good manners, sitting down and placing the hand on the chest back and forth in a motion lightly. Even the descendants of Imam Hussein, those who Allah put as caliphs after him for mankind, did not remember Imam Hussein by jumping and beating oneself to a beat. This is cultural and not part of Shia Islam. I'm aware of as a Shia Muslim that there are many Shia Muslims who do this cultural act. It should be reformed to the practices of Prophet Muhammad and his family. That is to cry and lightly beat the chest, nothing more adding to it as the culture has come up with. There is a narration from Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, one of the Imams to mankind from Prophet's family, according to Shia Islam, besides a leader said to mankind according to Shia Islam, also the jurisprudential scholar Shia Islams across the world adheres to, that states following: O Shia of the family of Muhammad, you are attributed to us, be an adornment for us and do not be a burden upon us. This reinforces the importance of the followers' actions in shaping to be a positive representation. Unfortunately, there is no akhlaq, or what is called in English good mannerism, with the mourning procedures that promotes fake crying, jumping and hitting oneself hard on the face and chest to a musical beat. So this is also a reminder for Shia Muslims to reflect upon and think deeply about how to mourn for Imam Hussein. But fortunately, there is the true part of Shia Islam as for today also, believers who correctly commemorate the death of Imam Hussein and his sacrifice for the religion and for his grandfather Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him and his family. This by crying and lightly put one's right hand to the chest where the heart is. This is what you have to go back to. These believers are representing Shia Islam correctly by following the true teachings regarding this. The true teachings from Prophet Muhammad and his family, in which a minority of Shia Muslims has understood from today's time. As for the correct mourning procedure, my last words are, what would be the problem then with this mourning from Shia Muslims when the proofs are there that it is permissible? Is it maybe weird when we see many people do it together? You can see it as a protest, as it is a protest against oppression and injustice of what happened to the leader set by Allah at his time. And by mentioning this event that happened a long time ago, it opens up people's hearts towards searching for the justice of Imam Hussein and the oppression he went through, so that more people can come to Islam by seeing an example in Imam Hussein in the cause of Allah. By finding the good mannerism and righteousness of the biography of Imam Hussein, we must ask who is the Lord of Imam Hussein. That Lord must be beautiful. When many people go out and demonstrate together, do we see it as something wrong or them fighting for their cause? It is rather fascinating to see and gives oneself the courage to stand for justice, as long as the protest in itself is in accordance with justice. Who are the Shia Muslims hurting? No one at all. And when we see millions of Muslims pray in a park in congregation, or to be in Mecca around the Kaaba all together for media to react, for some non-Muslims this gives feelings of discomfort while it is the truth. And exactly the same is it giving some Muslims discomfort when Shia Muslims in harmony against oppression cries and put their hands on their chest in rhythm for Imam Hussein in Allah's cause. Allah makes it clear in the Quran to persistently stand firm in name of justice within chapter 4 verse 135. This is exactly what Shia Muslims are doing against the oppressors of Imam Hussein and his family when they mourn and are standing there together as a protest. Allah also mentions in chapter 4 verse 148 that He does not like evil to be heard, but only if it is for justice. So we should never see it as evil for what Shia Muslims are protesting against when they together mourn for Imam Hussein. We now know the answers to why Shia Muslims mourn, its evidence within the religion of Islam, and the misusage some Shia Muslims do with this act, and its clarification in relation to if it belongs to Shia Islam or not. Lastly, to obtain a high status in paradise, since there are low levels of paradise and high levels of paradise, then love for Prophet Muhammad and his family is required, as they hold the highest status. To have love is not something we just say, rather it should be there in our hearts, and having love in our hearts is the highest level one can achieve in paradise towards Allah, His Prophet and the family of the Prophet, more than simply doing good deeds in Allah's way without love, which is logical to believe so. What is better, to love Allah and do good deeds, or just doing good deeds for obtaining a paradise or for the avoidance of hell? To elevate one's faith to its highest peak, love and obedience to Prophet Muhammad and his family is necessary. They are the people of guidance and the key to correct knowledge, purity and wisdom for us to have better relationship with Allah our Creator. Regarding Imam Ali, Shia Islam's first successor to Prophet Muhammad, it is mentioned that if we do not love Imam Ali, we are considered hypocrites, risking not entering paradise. Loving him is a sign of faith. This is mentioned in, for instance, Sunan al-Nasai 50:22. Therefore, to have faith is to love Prophet Muhammad and his family, and to love means in our heart, because concepts like love and hypocrisy is not just by the mouth and tongue. Otherwise, anyone can utter "I love you" and have something else in the heart, right? Thus, for all these reasons, we should love Imam Hussein, and if we do not, we should try our best in our life to gain this love and for us to remember him in his tragedy once a year. If we do not remember Imam Hussein each year, at least we should read or hear about the incident. We will be with those we love in paradise, and what greater status is there than being with Prophet Muhammad, who loves his family, and for us to be with them, those who taught us about Allah and his religion. Shouldn't we be thankful to our Prophet and his family for guiding us to Allah? What great sacrifice they must have gone through for the believers. As an example, if Imam Hussein did not die on the plains of Karbala, standing against oppression and injustice, then the Muslim world today would be full of tyrants, and more cruelty would be than what it is today. Risk for the religion of the Prophet not reaching us, since everything would be eradicated by the tyrants who themselves did not follow the religion. Then we wouldn't know about the religion of Allah. And for all Muslims, it is known that Prophet Muhammad will cry for the believers in the Day of Judgment, pleading Allah for us to obtain paradise. Such are Prophet Muhammad and his family, the sacrifice they have made and the care they have for us. What wonderful role models we have. For one to be with the Prophet and his family is the closest relationship one can have with Allah, since Prophet Muhammad is closest to Allah in paradise. By loving Prophet Muhammad and his family, we are also very close to Allah, Allah's Prophet, the Prophet's family, and the righteous believers in paradise.